Putting on my top hat, tying up my white tie, brushing up my tail. Oh,
Welcome to Hatcast,
the podcast about hats.
I'm Charles Berman.
And I'm Carl Bernhardson.
And we're here to talk
about hats. See, notice how I said that in a kind of spooky voice?
Yes. Let's try again. We're here to talk about
hats.
Ooh. That's right, ladies and gentlemen.
This is a Halloween episode of Hatcast.
Did you previously know that hats can be quite frightening?
I've been frightened by hats.
Have you? Under what circumstances?
Now I'm realizing that that's not true.
Well, I imagine... Well, I can only think of... Well, that bowler hat with the blade in it that we talked about.
Oh, right.
James
That's
Bond
a
movie.
frightening hat.
Vlad the Impaler nailing the hats to the heads of...
Yes, the hat is less frightening than the man with the nail and the hammer.
Well, yes, that's true. I suppose if someone tries to smother you or attack you with a hat in some fashion... But again, still, the attack is more frightening than the hat
yes.
itself.
It is not so much the hat that is frightening.
Perhaps if a hat represents an ideology that you find
right,
frightening.
that is frightening to you.
Yeah.
And
maybe an SS hat.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be scary. I wouldn't want to run into
somebody wearing that.
Right.
You might think this person is frightening.
Right.
In part because of how you read the hat.
Yes. That's true. Hats can inspire fear. And you know what? That's actually a hat that was probably designed to inspire fear.
I think I get that
continues
idea.
to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're talking about a hat
that's right.
that is worn by something that children are frightened of.
That's right.
And I guess people before the widespread debunking of
by
their existence.
Mean teachers
Yes.
Sometimes when they dress up for Halloween.
Yes.
Oh, we should mention, of course. Now, I wore the same hat as yesterday, so that's not very interesting. I wore the same hat as the last episode.
Yes, which we now are revealing was recorded yesterday. So there's no new correspondence.
I don't think we need to keep that secret.
No, there's no new correspondence to deal with since the last episode that we recorded hasn't hit yet.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to be really psychic to write his correspondence.
Right, or one of our friends or close relatives.
I mean, we have spoken perhaps with friends and relatives since then, but they weren't talking about hats.
No.
Although I talked to a Russian person recently who said to me that one thing they like to make fun of about American films is that the characters always tend to go outside in the winter without hats on.
I never thought of that. I suppose that's not something you would do in Russia. Go outside without a hat in the winter.
Honestly, it's not something I would do in upstate New York either.
No, I
said, here in upstate New York, we tend to wear hats when we go outside in the winter.
Right.
I think most people do.
Yeah.
People say that we might have passed the era of the obligatory hat. I think if you're going to be outdoors for a long period of time in January in upstate New York, we have not.
Right.
But for practical purposes.
And speaking practically, I wore a hat today. And it is different than the hat that I wore the last time that I spoke about what hat I wore.
Listeners, you might remember this hat.
Yes, it is my deerstalker
That's
without
right.
flaps.
Yeah.
It was given to me as a gift, and I was very happy to be able to wear it because it is nice and cool out.
Perfect autumnal hat.
Yes, I got to wear my sweaters and my nice wool hat made in Scotland. It's a Ross hat. I think we've talked about this. I think I've worn this one before on the show. It's a lovely, lovely sort of checked flannel wool hat. And it is, imagine a deerstalker without the ear flaps. And you've got this one. I think there's even a picture of me wearing it on the Facebook page.
Perhaps?
Or
that's right.
on
yes.
on the YouTube video for the introduction. There's a picture of Charles and I. And that's the hat that I'm wearing.
Yeah.
So I'm
try to spread that hat picture around a little more.
Yes. So I'm happy that I got the chance to wear it today, and it did keep my head warm, and I got to wear that and my new boots, which I was also excited about. But that's not a hat, so we don't need to get into
sort
that.
of like a hat for your feet.
A hat for each foot.
Yes.
In the same way, there's a hat for each skull that I have.
A man for all seasons, a hat for each foot. Now,
and speaking of seasons, it is autumn. And we are fast approaching the holiday of Halloween, where people dress up. And so lots of people will be wearing hats as components for costumes.
That's right. So if your costume is fisherman, you might wear a fisherman's hat.
Yes. If your costume is Sherlock Holmes, you may wear a
Deerstalker,
deerstalker.
yeah.
If your costume is a doctor, you may wear that sort of antiquated
That mirror
thing,
yeah.
which we should talk about at some point.
Yeah.
I think it's a hat. It's a headband. What is it? I don't know. It sort of fits into that whole green visor territory of a thing that people used to wear for a profession on their head that the function has been lost.
I haven't really seen that on a doctor lately.
Yeah.
Now, people aren't often very frightened of Sherlock Holmes.
No.
Unless they're criminals who cannot distinguish fact from fiction.
Right.
And they're not often that afraid of fishermen unless they are people who've confused themselves with fish.
But people are often afraid of witches.
I don't know about often anymore.
People have at times been frightened by witches. I know that I was frightened by the Wicked Witch of the West in the 1930s movie version of The Wizard of Oz.
I think she was intended to be a little bit frightening to children.
I think that children were very frightened by her.
But that was more of you were watching the screen and it was a frightening scene. You didn't believe that a witch was going to hex you or put a bad spell on you.
I don't know, when I was 5, I might have been a little concerned.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember believing in witches?
Oh. You know, I think at some point someone did have to explain witches are not real to me.
Right.
So yes, I suppose at a time I did, especially when you're a child,
right?
And children's literature and media is filled with witches who are casting spells on the heroes of your story, right? Or causing trouble, or want your shoes.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean let's be fair. When we say that witches are not real, it's a pretty big subject, right?
Right. Yeah.
Witches for hundreds and hundreds of years were a real serious concern.
Right, and
many people
believed to be a legitimate and very pressing threat.
And many people died, and many people were very worried about them.
Right.
And they wrote guidebooks to avoiding the danger of witches.
Right. King James the First and Sixth. Right.
Yes.
He wrote a guide
of demonology, a book about witches. There was a famous Malleus Maleficarum.
Mm-hmm. That gets
Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live.
Mm-hmm.
And many people died from being accused of being witches.
So it is serious history.
Yeah. Now there are sort of fewer people that are serious about thinking witches are real.
Right. As far as the threatening kind of witches, I think there are people who believe that they are producing magic in some way and may call themselves a witch. But it is different than the historical frightening concept of someone in your town using magical powers to do harm to you and your family.
Right. And there will be people who, for instance, object to Harry Potter books because they think that it encourages witchcraft.
Right.
But I don't think they're really afraid that they're going to be hexed by a witch. They're afraid that it's going to turn children away from Christianity.
Right.
And virtue.
Right. Which is a different fear than the historical fear of witches, which was that there was someone in your vicinity who was using a power that you don't understand to cause you harm.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's probably we should distinguish from people who now call themselves witches.
Right. We are not talking about that.
That is a religion.
We're talking about sort of the historical concept of witches and the hat that we perceive them as wearing in popular culture, which is the pointed hat. I guess we should describe it, right?
Yeah.
The pointed hat with a very wide brim.
Right.
Almost always black, sometimes dark purple.
Or maybe dark brown.
Yeah, or dark brown. Yeah. But a big pointed hat with a large brim.
Yeah. I knew people in high school, for instance, who were members of this Wicca religion.
Right, which is not what we're talking about.
I don't think that they wear these hats or ride broomsticks.
No, I think that neither of those things are accurate. So let's be clear that we're not getting into. This is not another episode about hats worn by members of a religion. This is the historical representation of what people think that dangerous potential magical users in their community are wearing.
Right, but if you are a dangerous magical practitioner in a community, putting hexes in secret on people,
You're probably not wearing a big...
you're not going to say, let me wear the hat that says I'm a secret magical hexer.
Right. Which is why I was curious about where did this hat come from? Because if you look at historical representations of witches, they're usually wearing either what everybody else is wearing, or when they're practicing witchcraft, they're wearing nothing, or a scarf, or just normal flowing clothing, sort of, not...
Yeah.
It was not the idea of someone in a black dress with a black hat with a point on it that says, I am here to cause you harm as a witch. And I wonder how much of that is associated in our current imagination of a witch. How much of it is associated with the Wizard of Oz?
I think a great deal, but I think those hats were associated with witches
Even
before, yeah.
And they were, from a quick read of the Wikipedia article about witches' hats, it sounds like the pointed hat was a Victorian invention as people started celebrating Halloween and needed something to very quickly identify people as witches.
It seems like
imagery.
Its immediate association with witches is Victorian. We have a very 19th century looking woodcut we're looking here called A Flight of Witches, and they're all wearing these hats and riding broomsticks. And it's the same
this
hat
one is riding a cat actually in the sky.
One of them is riding a cat.
And this is a fantastic woodcut here.
Wearing a cape as well.
This woman is riding a flying cat.
Yeah. And I think at some point this became sort of associated with the kind of hat a grumpy and unpleasant old woman would wear.
Right.
And that it then became associated with witches.
Oh. Pull up the Witch of Wall Street. Did she wear one of these hats?
Oh, let me see.
There was a miserly woman who became very, very wealthy through stock dealings and always wore black. Yeah. Hetty Green. Yes.
Oh, I didn't know about her.
Yes, and she was known as the Witch of Wall Street, and she was active during the, I think 1880s. Am I right? I guess we can.
Here we're looking at her picture in 1905, and
Okay.
she does look pretty grumpy, but her hat is
a wreath of
quite
flowers.
elaborate. It's a wreath of flowers, and it's pretty impressive hat, but it is entirely unlike the witch's hat, unless you
right. I was wondering if there was
very literal.
some sort of connection, but they were probably.
This is later, yeah.
This is later, yeah. They were probably calling her the Witch of Wall Street because she was considered to be unpleasant and wore dark clothing.
It is unpleasant, grumpy, and old women have often been insultingly called witches without any implication of actual magic going on.
This is true.
Yeah,
it is a common insult.
An insulting term that is used, yeah.
Right. So I guess it would make sense that you would just sort of imagine witches to wear whatever elderly women wore in a period of time. And the pointed hat is decidedly, and has been decidedly, unfashionable for a very long time.
Yes. You rarely run into someone using one as fashion. Now, right. Wikipedia shows us an 1894 woman, a young woman, who's
holding a broomstick.
She's holding actually, she is holding a broom, but I think it looks like mainly it's to sweep with. And because she's otherwise got a rather nice dress of the era. She's wearing a cat.
She's wearing a cat and an owl.
Yeah, she's wearing an owl.
This is a witch. This is a Victorian
supposed to be a witch.
Yeah. But she's wearing a very fashionable dress at the same time.
Funny. I think she's supposed to be a sort of a young, fashionable witch, actually. She's wearing a cat and an owl. She's definitely a witch. The caption says, a woman from 1884 wearing what is commonly viewed to be a witch hat. What is now commonly viewed to be a witch hat. And it comes from a lithograph of fancy dresses described, or what to wear at fancy balls.
Okay, so this is someone in a costume dressed as a witch.
But the caption, witch, Hubbard, mother. All right, so this is clearly a witch costume.
Yes.
That the captioner just didn't realize was a witch costume and thought was high fashion.
Yeah.
No, this is
so by the mid 1880s, this was already a concept of what a witch looks like.
Yeah. Now, to be honest, this is the 1884 version of what you would see in Halloween stores now as sexy witch.
Right.
It is less skimpy than that because
it's 1884.
Propriety was easier to find in 1884.
Right. So so this is someone in a costume. Yes. So this is someone dressing as adopting some of the elements of what they imagine a witch would wear and still trying to look good.
Right,
So.
yeah, which tends to still happen today.
Yes.
So, where does this hat come from? Well, if we just go as far as Wikipedia, which we don't always want to do, it says the origin of the witch hat, as commonly displayed today, is unknown, but there are several theories.
Oh, good.
Now, one is that it might have been an exaggeration of the dunce cap.
I don't think so.
No.
Since the dunce cap came about it. Yeah, no. If you
a
want to learn about the
terrible
dunce
theory.
cap, listen to
our
dunce cap.
dunce cap episode. But this has nothing to do with the dunce cap. For some reason, people like to assume all vaguely pointed hats have the same origin.
Oh, people kept... Wasn't there was a sort
of Phrygian cap.
Yes.
Entirely unrelated to a
yeah,
witch's
we
cap.
when we were doing research for this, we ran into people trying to suggest that the Phrygian cap and the witch's cap were the same, which is completely wrong. Although I am remembering from the dunce cap episode that people kept trying to attribute the dunce cap to being based on a style of hat that was worn by a late medieval philosopher, Duns Scotus,
yes.
who some people, making the leap between sort of philosopher and thinker and wizard, is not that crazy, right?
Some people, the idea is that the dunce cap is related to Duns Scotus, who wore a tall, pointy hat, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence of that. Therefore, witches were wise philosophers. They also wore tall, pointy hats, and so witches did too, but they had a brim.
Right.
But I think the actual evidence for this is pretty scanty. Prove me wrong, but I think so. Now, someone asked in the Ask Historians group online for the origins of this, and a historian of European folklore replied, that lithograph we looked at was from a collection of Cornish folklore in 1865, and he says the association of pointed hats with witchcraft is old and is based on traditional headwear found in Western Britain, especially Wales and Cornwall or Devon. Traditional practices, traditional headwear, and folk remedies all tied nicely together in the popular mind, hence the association of this type of hat with witchcraft.
This seems to be the most reasonable explanation that I've seen.
And if actually you go to the Wikipedia for Welsh hat, it is a hat worn by women as part of the Welsh national costume. And if you look at one, I'm not sure when this photo was from, but it looks like a 19th century photo of a old lady wearing a Welsh hat, and it's not quite pointed. It flattens at the top.
It's kind of what you would imagine as the pilgrim hat, but without the buckle, right?
But when this was fashionable for old women in areas that were
rural,
sort of put down by the English,
yes,
you can see how it might have become associated with crones,
right,
and thereby with witches.
So you're somebody who's drawing a Victorian cartoon about witches, and you need to depict an old woman from a rural area. You would put her in a hat like this, and then it's not very hard to imagine a hat with a flat top becoming a hat with a point, and there you have your witch's hat.
Yeah.
It is interesting to think of it as it's a hat that probably came about in imagination and in drawing before it actually existed as a hat.
Right. It could be.
Because now they're manufactured by the millions for Halloween costumes and...
there probably were hats vaguely like that made by some hatter.
Right. There have been pointed hats throughout history, but a hat that is pointed and has a wide brim and is meant to represent a witch.
To represent a witch, yeah.
Did not exist until that had already developed as an amalgamation of traditional hats. And hats worn by elderly women.
Another historian on here gives several theories. The first two seem a little bit dismissible.
Pointy hats have not been popular since medieval times, so wearing a pointy hat was an indicator of being different than others. Unfashionable, right?
Yeah.
And I guess this once again ties into the how do you represent someone from a rural area who is elderly? They're probably not wearing the most fashionable clothes.
Yeah. But there is a third theory which seems it might hold some water. That this historian says, I don't know if he's a historian. It doesn't.
We don't know his credentials.
Yeah.
Someone on the internet suggests.
Yeah. That in the Fourth Council of the Lateran, Jews were required to wear a certain kind of hat. And it's illustrated, and these hats look very witch hat-like.
It's a pointy hat with a brim.
Yes. Now, the brim sort of folds down a little bit more.
Right.
But it looks pretty similar.
I would agree.
Yeah. So I didn't think we were going to be doing 2 Jewish-themed programs in a row at all, really.
No, I guess I hadn't thought that. But it would make sense, though. This is a pretty reasonable. This is the first time I've seen this explanation, though. But it is reasonable. I'd like to get the origin of that image that he links us to.
Mm-hmm.
But
and then the person says anti-Semites long associated Jews with Satan. That's not very disputable. According to the book Eyewitnessing, the use of images as historical evidence, people arrested for witchcraft were obligated to appear in public wearing a so-called Jew hat.
Well,
and it says here, as in the case of accusation of eating babies leveled against Jews and witches alike, the pointed hat in the woodcut, which I believe is probably the same woodcut, like the woman's hooked nose, illustrates the migration of stereotypes. The hat may no longer evoke images of Jews, but it once did. The evidence for this assertion includes the law promulgated at Buda in 1421 that anyone arrested for the first time on a charge of witchcraft was obligated to appear in public wearing a so-called Jew's hat.
Well, interesting.
Yeah.
And it would make sense that you know what, though? And then this sort of ties right back around to the dunce hat, which is wearing a cone-shaped hat as punishment.
Yes, for someone meant to be foolish.
Yeah.
And so I think this is sort of coming together. In early modern Spain, heretics arrested by the Inquisition were obligated to wear similar hats. The confusion between witches and Jews is a revealing one, testifying to the general idea of the other, and what has been called a general visual code expressive of subhumanity. So,
well, we're painting a much more complete picture than I thought we were going to get to, based on my initial research. Yeah.
Right. So I think these pointed hats, since medieval times, were associated with heretical Jews and therefore witches.
Right, and public shaming.
And by the Victorian era, in recent memory, somewhat similar-looking hats were associated with old Welsh or Cornish women who were from a sort of looked-down-upon group.
Right. And you sort of have the merging of these two ideas.
Creating, by the 1880s or 90s, a stereotype of witches wearing this particular kind of hat.
Well, mystery solved.
Yeah. I think as close as we can get.
Yeah, I that's a very compelling explanation right there.
I don't know if everyone has put all these pieces together, but it seems right.
Yeah. We couldn't be the first ones to put it all together.
No, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure someone has done a better job than we have.
I mean, it took us 20 minutes of Googling to...
Yeah, but no, I think we found a couple elements that ring true to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Rather than... Pointy hats have been associated with knowledge and power through all time, which seems to be what...
If you just Google, why do witches wear witches' hats, that's what you get over and over. So, yes, this is... and where did we source the... what was the source for the hats that were forced on people while they were accused of witchcraft? Or
this was this book, Eyewitnessing the Use of Images as Historical Evidence.
Eyewitnessing the Use of Images as Historical Evidence. That's a book that we should probably read.
Yeah,
I bet we would. I bet it's filled with valuable information on hats.
This 1892 source of a magazine called Industry refers to the foot of Trollhätte, witch's hat or cap, the greatest waterfall in Europe. Which I don't know if it's usually called witch's hat, but the fact that it's named Trollhätte makes me guess that maybe it's also associated with troll hats.
Right.
Which do kind of look a little like witches' hats.
They do. Yeah, once again, it's that sort of pointy hat.
Yeah, and we don't want to imply that all pointy hats are the same hat.
No, we're actively trying to go against that concept.
To distinguish them and make a bit of a taxonomy here.
Right. Well,
But in 1500, if you go to a hat maker, it will just be kind of make me a hat.
Right.
So it gets harder, I think, the farther back you go to really distinguish hat from hat, unless you get the hats defined in sumptuary laws.
Right. Which we will be able to sort of dip into sumptuary laws and hats that were worn by specific offices within the Catholic Church, because those are very well documented. Those are sort of easy to attack. But just sort of general history of the pointed hat is a little tricky.
Yeah. By the 1890s, there are plenty of references to witches' hats. And they seem to assume that everyone sort of knows what it means.
Yeah, it seems between the 1860s and the 1880s, this stereotype of what a witch looks like has really solidified. And this is, it's been over 100 years at this point since people have seriously considered witches a societal threat, and they've turned into sort of an imaginary thing to scare children with.
Yes.
And now you need to be able to draw them quickly.
Yes.
And make it very clear. Oh, look, she's wearing a pointy hat and has a cat and a broom. It's a witch.
Yes. Which, I mean, cats are popular pets. Brooms are useful for moving dust to a place where it can be easily disposed of.
There's one in most every house.
Yes.
I think I have a broom somewhere around here, but
I have a broom, a hat, and a cat, but I am yet not a witch. Well, so if let's do the common test. If you saw someone walking down the street in a witch hat, you would think that person was
dressing up as a witch.
Yes, I think so.
Is it Halloween or sometime around Halloween? Are they in a play where they're meant to be a witch?
That's about it, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably the only time that you would expect to see one.
Let's rate the witch hat.
I'm excited to do this. I think it's very stylish. I actually like it. Oh, Charles, is this the first time we've done a hat that is pretty exclusively associated as a women's hat?
I think exclusively, yes.
Yeah, I think it is. It only took us, 29 episodes?
I think it would have been stylish in the 1840s or so.
Right.
Perhaps. It was if you're thinking about the Jew's hat, it was a hat of shame and punishment.
Right. It was never meant to be stylish.
Yeah.
But then it was.
You could do it in a stylish manner. I guess I'll give it a 5 in between.
Yeah, and I think that speaking specifically of not the historical predecessors of the witch's hat, but of the witch's hat itself, I think it looks nice. I think a cone-shaped hat and a wide brim look good on just about everybody.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm going to give it probably a 7.5. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Now, what about usefulness or practicality?
It's practical about once a year.
Yeah, maybe a 1
for a seasonal activity.
Not a 0, but a 1.
Yeah. I'll give it a 2.
So overall, the witch's hat gets a 3.875. Not the most highly rated hat, but nonetheless, it has its place.
It does.
If you want to present the image of a cartoon witch, that is what you go to.
Yes.
All right. So we hope you all have a happy and extremely mortified, terrified, and petrified Halloween. I hope you are sent into shivering thrills of horror by everything you see.
I hope that doesn't happen. That sounds awful.
I'm exaggerating.
I hope that if you choose to do anything on Halloween, that it's fun.
I hope you perhaps go to an enjoyable party or trick or treat with children.
If you know some children, I hope you go trick or treating with them. If you are a child, enjoy trick or treating.
Yes.
I wonder how many children listen to Hatcast.
I don't know. If you are not a child, have a bowl of candy in case children knock at your door.
As my first year as a homeowner, I'm looking forward to that.
Oh yes, that's right. And if children knock on your door dressed as witches, give them a lecture about the history of the witch hat.
I have here on this flash drive a recording of an episode of Hatcast.
Instead of candy, here is a flash drive with a recording you should listen to.
You should learn about what you're wearing on your head right now. Now go off and have fun.
If you would like to be in touch with us, please just email us, hatcast@yandex.com. That's HATCAST at YANDEX.com.
We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm a mean old witch with a hat, and I ride on my broom.